And she was starring in London in productions with adult casts, but she would play lead roles like Richard III. And she was so successful that she went on tour all around the country. She visited the theatre in Dover, playing these roles, and we've got playbills that record it.
And what era are we talking about? That's so unusual.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there was a big vogue for this. There was a big fashion for child performers in the 19th century. She was about in the early 19th century, but she was very successful. She as an actress there, and she was the oldest living actress because she'd started at such a young age. But there's lots more child performers that were sort of pushed on in the hopes of making a bit of money for their parents who weren't quite as successful as she was.
And what about unusual performances, whether it's in Kent or elsewhere? You must have found playbills and thought, they did it where?
Well, what's, to me, one of the most interesting aspects that we don't have that many records of, unfortunately, is these travelling companies that they travelled in the sort of medieval tradition, and that carried on until the 20th century. So they would go to a really rural area. Access to drama. They would turn up with these put-up theatres in many cases, which were originally like tents, and then they did begin to use sort of, kind of assemble it all together in the space of a couple of hours type buildings. And they do Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, the big hits, and that's all most people saw as well. Most people only saw about 10 different plays.
And is there a period when it suddenly becomes fashionable to do Shakespeare, do a modern version?
Couple of years ago, which was based on a sort of the premise was that everybody in Ireland having it large. It was genius. I saw that production. It was absolutely brilliant. But have we Shakespeare for our own era?
Always. I mean, those sorts of ones where we kind of reimagine a production taking place in somewhere different. Often people update Othello. That's very much a 20th century phenomenon. Right. Really the mid-20th century. What we do see, though, is that people always used to stage it in their contemporary dress, and that's the case for much of the 19th century. And then about halfway through, you begin to get this fashion started by really an actor called Charles Keane for period-specific Shakespeare. So if it's Julius Caesar, they made everything as historically accurate to just Julius Caesar's time as possible. And this